How's it going?
Good, I guess.
Like Saturday afternoon, your wife dragged you out to shop?
Yep.
Yeah,
Worst
me
day
too.
of my life.
Worst day of your life?
Yeah. Shopping with my wife.
Yeah, I hope we'll be out of here soon.
Yeah, me too. Probably about the next 6 hours.
Say, did you see that guy this week that jumped from like 24 miles up in space? Did you see that news story?
I heard about it. That guy's crazy.
Yeah, no
Nut
kidding.
job. Talk about instant burial.
Yeah,
all
there's no
over.
way I thought he was going to make it.
I thought he was either going to black out or have a heart attack on the way down myself. This guy's nuts.
Yeah. So, what do you think happens after life? I mean, if that guy would have hit the ground, what do you think would have happened?
I don't think he would have much to worry about. Me, myself, nah, I don't know. I don't think much about that stuff.
Well, do you believe in a heaven or a hell?
Heaven is anywhere that's not here.
Yeah, I don't like shopping that much either. Or standing around waiting. So how do you think you make it to heaven?
Yes, dear. Anything you want, dear. Anything beyond that, well, yeah, that's hell.
Well, I mean, you think you got to be a good person to make it to heaven?
I guess. I never really thought much about that stuff.
Well, how about you? Do you feel like you're a pretty good person?
Yeah, I think I'm a pretty decent person, you know.
So you think you'd make it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd make it.
So, do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
I ain't going anywhere for a while.
Yeah, me either. So, if you were to answer the question, have you ever told a lie any time in your life? How would you answer that?
Not see my wife. Maybe a few.
Yeah, me too. How about, have you ever stolen anything in your life?
Does her heart count?
You're a real Romeo.
Nope, but she thinks I am.
So you've never stolen anything, or you have?
Yeah, I've taken something that didn't belong to me maybe once, twice. I don't know.
Yeah. Have you ever heard what the Bible says? Jesus said, if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, that you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. Have you ever done that?
A couple of times. Maybe. Yeah, I'm a guy. Come on.
Yeah, guys.
Yeah.
I know how it goes. So, it's Keith, right?
Yeah.
So, Keith, you told me that you thought you were a good person, that you were going to make it to heaven, but by your own admission, you're a lying, thieving, adulterous person. And these were your words, not mine.
Okay.
So, if life ends, how are you going to make it?
Not very well, I guess.
Yeah, typically we don't think about these kind of things very often, but let's put it this way. If you were in front of a judge and he was going to judge you whether you were innocent or guilty according to God's commandments, how do you think he would judge you?
Guilty, I guess.
And if he judges you guilty and he's a good judge, where do you think he would send you? To heaven or to hell?
I hate malls. Probably hell.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear we all do those things. I told you I had lied and stolen. It's when you think about it, if you were in that courtroom and you were guilty of a crime in a civil court, and the judge told you hey, your life in prison or a $500,000 fine, and you didn't have the money to pay, you'd go to jail, right? I mean, it'd be life in prison. But let me ask you this. If at the last moment before they were about to sentence you, your dad came into the courtroom, he busted in and he said, "Wait, Judge, wait. This is my son I love. I've sold everything I have, and I have the $500,000 to pay the fine." How would that make you feel?
Pretty good, considering Daddy's rich.
Yeah, so if he pays the fine, does that change your guilt?
No, I mean, I'd still be guilty, just
You'd get to leave the courtroom.
get bailed out.
Keith, that's what, have you ever heard of Jesus? Do you ever hear what he did for us?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't really believe in that stuff. I mean, is that what he did?
That's what he did. He busted into the courtroom at the last second, and he paid our fine. We're all guilty of sin, but he paid the fine so that if we put our trust in him, then he will pay the fine for us, and we get to walk out of the courtroom. And that's how you make it to heaven. Have you ever put your trust in Jesus?
Never really thought much of it.
Do you think you might want to do that?
Yeah, I think I'd like to check that out.
When do you think you'll do that?
Not going anywhere for a while.
Well, Keith, would you just make me one promise that you'll consider the things we talked about today, that you'll think about them, and that, like that guy that jumped from 24 miles trusted in his parachute, that you'll put Jesus on and you'll trust in him just like that?
Sure.
You got a Bible at home?
Nah.
I'll get you one. You said you weren't going anywhere. I'll be back in a few minutes. But take that Bible, open it up, and read it. Put your trust in Jesus.
All right.
Thanks. It wasn't too long ago I was really, really intimidated about approaching somebody randomly at a mall or anywhere else to share the gospel message with them. But I'm not so intimidated anymore. I still get a little bit scared when I go to approach a stranger, but you know what? When you start talking about the gospel and you have the hope of salvation, you have the message that brings life, and you begin talking and the Holy Spirit moves in and starts to open somebody's heart and mind, and you see what God is doing in someone's life, it's an awesome, awesome thing. If you think you might be interested in growing in a way that makes you more comfortable in sharing the gospel with others, then we're going to have a class here. October 26th is a Friday night, and the 27th and Saturday morning. It's called Conquer Your Fear, Share Your Faith. There's books on the back table and a sign-up sheet. So if you would, if you got any questions, I'll be back there this morning. Otherwise, Pastor,
Thank you, brother.
you're on.
Give them a round of applause. That was pretty good. That was good. Well, welcome this morning. So glad that you're able to come and worship God with us and celebrate. We have a great Sunday lined up for you. We have an amazing speaker to come here this morning and share a testimony and inform us. And I'd like to first of all tell you this is Missions Sunday and Faith Promise Sunday. We as a Nazarene church have a mission. And first of all, I'd like to tell you a mission is different than missions. A mission, we all should have a mission in our life. God's mission is simple: to redeem that which was lost through his Son, Jesus Christ. That's the mission of our Heavenly Father, and should be our mission as well. I think it's awesome that we have a church that's willing to take busy time, offer pizza and salad in a comfy, warm environment, and teach you how to share your faith and how to be bold and how you can approach a complete stranger and maybe lead them to Christ and get their name in the Lamb's Book of Life. So that's exciting, and I hope you take advantage of that. Yeah, clap, get excited. All right, we got 25 excited about the evangelism class. But the mission as the Nazarene church says to make Christ-like disciples in all the nations. And we come through this 7-word phrase or mission through the core values of the Nazarene Church, which is we are a Christian church, we are a holiness church, and we are a missional church. And I am glad to be part of a church that is a missional church. We major in missions in the Nazarene Church. So that's exciting. So I want you, here in a moment, as I introduce our speaker, Ms. Thea Audrey. She is a graduate from one of our seminaries from Olivet in 2006, where she graduated from, and she is now actively serving as a missionary. And I'd like her to come up and share and give a warm core welcome to Thea Audrey, please.
When I was a little girl, I loved playing hide and seek. My favorite thing to do was actually hide in the music room closet behind my mom's dresses because no one ever seemed to find me there. But as I was thinking about it, human beings have been hiding and God has been seeking from the very beginning. When Adam and Eve sinned, their first instinct was to run and to try to hide from God. And yet our God, from the very beginning, He called out to them and to us, "Where are you?" We think about David, oftentimes in light of the story of David and Goliath and how he defeated a giant that was much bigger than he was as a shepherd boy. We think about the Psalms that he wrote, where he praised God in the middle of really difficult circumstances. But one of the lesser-known stories, at least to me, was about a time when David played hide and seek himself. Because you see, God had anointed David to be the king. However, Saul really didn't like that plan, and he decided to chase after David and try to kill him. So what did David do? He ran to hide in a cave of Adullam, as you'll see on the screen here. I think spelunking would be fun, and I'm afraid that I ran out of time to visit some of the caverns here in Virginia. But I admit that I have never gone to hide in a cave like this one. But it is rather enticing when you're living in an apartment that is filled with countless cockroaches and scores of gnats. Or when you're sick and trying to recover from an illness that doctors can't seem to figure out. Or when your husband has reemerging health problems of his own that leave you responsible to learn stick shift in not much more than a day and drive him everywhere he needs to go for the next 6 months. All this while you're trying to figure out how to minister to the different culture around you. Perhaps some of you are envisioning the country of service where I've been most recently, which is represented by this flag over here in the front. I was serving in Argentina. However, I'm actually describing my life in Kansas City, Missouri. I hope that you're not too disappointed that your missionary speaker is actually living in the United States right now. But things didn't go exactly as I planned, and I had to come home early from the field. When I moved to Argentina a little over a year ago, I was a single woman in a long-distance relationship, and I was anticipating a chance to adapt to yet another culture where God had opened the door. A new language, a new people. This here is a pink house where the president lives, rather than the White House that we have here. The current president is a female, but I don't think that they repainted it just on her behalf. I was also looking forward to taking a look at colorful houses like these where some of the famous soccer players from Argentina live. I saw many monuments and realized that the Argentine people in the not too distant future have had a rather troubled past. A lot of people from my generation were orphaned, and they have no idea where their parents were kidnapped and killed. So many people are without parents at this point. If you advance to the next couple of slides, you'll see a picture of my neighbor Susie. And the next slide, please. And another thing I was really looking forward to was the Argentine beef. Beef is a really big deal down there. Some people have the misperception that the Argentine people eat Mexican food. That it's really spicy and it's all rice and beans, but that's not the case. They eat a lot of steak and they eat a lot of empanadas, dough with all kinds of different fillings in it. I also thought that in the 3 roles that had been given to me, I was the assistant to the regional director, and he serves over the 10 countries where the Church of the Nazarene has work in South America. As regional personnel coordinator, which means that I would get to help out the 78 or so missionaries who are serving, along with the hundreds of volunteers who are also ministering there. And also, as regional secretary, Among other things, making sure that the pastors turn in their pastors' reports on time. All of this done in Portuguese and Spanish. I really thought that in those roles I was going to have a front row seat to what God was doing on the region. And He's doing a lot of great things. For example, in Colombia, the church is growing like wildfire, and their next goal is to build a coliseum for many thousands of people to gather together. In their most recent outreach, I think it's mentioned in the bulletin, I think it was 40,000 people that just attended this most recent outreach in Colombia. But you may very well be looking at the only missionary speaker who will come to your church and tell you that they gave up. Okay, don't throw me out yet, because I didn't give up on my faith, I didn't give up on my calling, and I didn't give up on my God. But I did have to give up on my idea of what my year and a half of service was going to look like. I had to give up on my idea that I knew best, that I have to stay here or God can't use me anymore. As a little girl, I had an idea of what missions might look like. At age 3, my parents asked me, Thea, what do you want to be for the church Halloween alternative? We didn't have a trunk or treat, we actually had something called a harvest party. And at age 3, I quickly and confidently responded, I want to be a missionary. So what did that look like? I wore a little dress from Panama, I had a stethoscope around my neck, and a Bible in my hand. But as I've grown up, I guess my concept of missions has grown with me. In 5th grade, I went on my very first work and witness trip to Ecuador and just started to fall in love with other cultures in the world, learning languages, but ultimately having a chance to see how God was working around the globe. There was a gentleman on that trip named Bob, and he was a lot like my grandfather. He got very ill when we got home from that trip, and I gave him a card when I was in 5th grade, and I said, Bob, I promise you that if you can't return to Ecuador, I will go in your honor. Bob passed away, but I felt that was a promise that I wanted to keep. So I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed. And I think oftentimes if God doesn't answer us immediately, we kind of give up praying and say, well, I guess that's really not what He wants. But I think one of two things happens when we persevere in prayer. He either changes our perspective and gets us on the same page with His will, or He says, okay, you've waited for my timing, and now I will give you a yes. So 12 years, 3 cities and 4 states and 3 cities later, I landed in a church that was taking a work and witness trip to Ecuador. They canceled the trip for a lack of interest, but I was able to go and fulfill that promise and see the way that God is continuing to work in the South America region. I also had a vision for Coffee House Ministry. I really felt that was a great place to combine a love for hospitality, music, artwork, and a place to just meet people where they are and share the gospel so that they could trade in their coffee cups for communion cups. But not a lot of other people shared my vision, and some people even called me crazy. They said, you're never going to do that in the Church of the Nazarene. But again, I continued to pray that God would open a door. And one day, when I was working in the missions office, a need came across my desk for someone to help open the very first Sweet Surrender Coffee House ministry in Poland. I spoke Spanish, so I wasn't sure why God had directed me to Poland, but I jumped on a plane about a month later, and this is a picture of one of our live concerts and some of the people that we had an opportunity to minister to. The next slide you'll see includes a couple of the women that I got to know in my neighborhood that met in my home for Bible study. At the end of the year, there was a young woman named Marta, and Marta, you have to understand that in the Polish culture, Catholicism is the expression of their faith. There aren't a lot of other options for churches to attend. And she said, Thea, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a nun, and I wanted to devote myself fully to God, but I kind of walked away from Him. I feel this distance, and it scares me. And I was able to share with Marta that she could be fully devoted to God right then and there where she was, that she didn't have to become a nun, but she could commit herself to God. And she said, Thea, I don't know, who knows? Maybe God sent you here at this time so that I could find my way back to Him. And I want to just encourage you that God is seeking out the Martas all around the globe, but He's also doing that right here where you live. If He hasn't called you to go, then by all means, stay right where you are. but open your eyes to the needs that are all around you and be encouraged at what God is doing all around the world. And yet, perhaps God wanted to strengthen my concept of service even further. And sometimes He teaches us best when we can recognize our weakness. About 3 months into my assignment in Argentina, I had begun to acclimate to the culture. I was enjoying many things about the Argentine culture. For one, their love for football. Football/soccer, that is. Someone told me that if I could not understand their love and passion for soccer, that I would never truly understand the Argentine heart. And these pictures were taken my second weekend in town at a district Nazarene event. And it was very clear that they had an intense love for God, but they also were very competitive and loved playing soccer. I also love that no matter what you see on the outside of their plain-looking church buildings, that there's incredibly vibrant things happening inside. For example, their Sunday school included mascots. They had a post office box and a pencil that would jump around and sing every week to collect the kids' Sunday school homework. At the end of Sunday school, everyone would get up with their individual class and quote a scripture verse. That was a little hard for me because I couldn't learn it that fast in Spanish, but it was amazing to see the way they were committing those scriptures to their hearts, but also the way they lived. There were strobe lights for the music and lots of clapping and dancing. And the traditional greeting in Argentina is to kiss someone on both cheeks. So you do an awful lot of kissing when you live in Argentina. But I guess I don't advise disobeying your parents. I really don't think that's advisable in any way. But I guess I might have just stretched some of the rules a little bit, because my mom always told me not to drink out of someone else's cup. And she also told me to say thank you when someone offers something to you. But I stretched those rules because in Argentina they have a tradition with something called mate. It's their national drink. It's loose leaf tea that they put in a metal cup or something similar to that. They pour hot water from a thermos that they carry around with them everywhere they go. And you drink it through a metal straw. Yes, it is very easy to burn your lips when a hot liquid comes through a metal straw. What it tastes like is kind of like alfalfa, so you can thank God for the times when they add sugar to it. But the server will taste it first, and once they think it's good enough, they'll fill it up with water again and hand it to the next person and pass it around until the water is gone or until everyone has had their fill. But the thing I didn't know is that you weren't supposed to thank them for it, because if you say gracias right away, then they think that you don't want to participate, you don't want to share in this time with them. You have to wait till the very end when the water runs out to say thank you. However, having just made it through the toughest part of my cultural adjustment, my body began to fail. I became incredibly ill, mostly after eating, and in a period of 3 months, I lost 35 pounds without trying. I was dizzy, I was often close to blacking out, and had level 10 excruciating abdominal pain, and was periodically vomiting after eating. I was weaker by the day and decided to come back to the States for some additional medical testing. I was handed a very unpleasant diagnosis that didn't have a lot of hope for recovery, but I was also given a new diet where I was supposed to eat 6 times a day, a very restricted diet. I think it would have been tempting for some to just say, okay, I'm just going to go home now. This is it, I'm done. But health is important. I agree with that, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that we remain faithful to God, and He had not given me release yet. So I boarded a plane back to Argentina a few weeks after the testing, and I was so thankful for the spirit of the Argentine that loves to share life, share mate. The gentleman next to me could see that I couldn't eat much of what was in my dinner, and so he shared with me from his dinner so that I had enough to eat on the flight back. I was really hoping that this new diet was going to help things become more manageable, and I continued to see Argentine doctors at a really great hospital just a mile up the road from the regional office. But doctors were scratching their heads and they really didn't know what was wrong. I can relate at that point to the way that David felt when he was hiding out in the cave of Adullam, afraid for his life, not really sure how God was going to bring his anointing to be king. How is he going to bring that to pass? I can understand what David was writing in Psalm 57 as he cried out to God and was committed to trusting and praising him wherever he was. I'd like to read to you Psalm 57, which is what David wrote while he was hiding out in this cave. I'll read it from the Contemporary English Version. This really was my prayer. God Most High, have pity on me. Have mercy. I run to you for safety. In the shadow of your wings, I seek protection till danger dies down. I pray to you, my protector. You will send help from heaven and save me, but you will bring trouble on my attackers. You are faithful, and you can be trusted. I live among lions who gobble down people. They have spears and arrows instead of teeth, and they have sharp swords instead of tongues. May you, my God, be honored above the heavens. May your glory be seen everywhere on earth. Enemies set traps for my feet and struck me down. They dug a pit in my path, but fell in it themselves. I am faithful to you, and you can trust me. I will sing and play music for you, my God. I feel wide awake. I will wake up my harp and wake up the sun. I will praise you, Lord, for everyone to hear, and I will sing hymns to you in every nation. Your love reaches higher than the heavens. Your loyalty extends beyond the clouds. May you, my God, be honored above the heavens. May your glory be seen everywhere on earth. One of the ways that I often pray to God in the middle of difficulty is through song. And I haven't shared this at every church that I've been at in the last week, but I feel that this is something that someone might need to hear, but not just hear, take to heart and submit something to God that they've been holding on to. So I'd like to share with you a prayer called I Surrender. Lord, I know you see this fear in my heart of what my future holds. I feel you softly ask if I can trust you more and give you control. So I kneel before you now, and I offer everything. Come and be the Lord of all I am or ever hope to be. I surrender to the one who loves me more than life. I surrender, here is my heart. I open it wide to the one who cannot be unfaithful. I now offer you all that I am. Oh, I surrender. From this day on, I'll be in your hands. Ooh, ooh, oh. I've been living for myself, and now I want to live for you alone. Come and help me when I'm weak and when my path seems so unknown. But you will be beside me still. I know you want what's best for me. So when I want to take control, Lord, please come and help my unbelief. I surrender to the one who loves me more than life. I surrender, here is my heart. I open it wide to the one who cannot be unfaithful. I now offer you all that I am. Oh, I surrender. From this day on, I'll be in your hands. Ooh. From this day on, I'll be in your hands. All to Jesus I surrender. I surrender all. In the middle of taking refuge in my God, who wants to be my hiding place in the middle of difficulty and in the middle of good times, He provided help to me in tangible ways through the love and support of fellow missionaries and Argentine brothers and sisters alike. I think in almost every church where I've spoken, there's someone who tells me, Thea, I had a call to missions at some point in my life and I didn't say yes to God. And they kind of have a sadness in their heart for not saying yes. But I like to encourage them and challenge them that it is never too late to say yes to God. And sometimes He'll open that door a second time in your life. You might be thinking, but you don't know how old I am. Well, okay, it probably doesn't matter much to me because when I was in Poland, there was a couple that really felt God asking them to serve with us for 3 months during the holidays. They would have rather been with their family. And actually, this is not them, so don't, this is not the same couple. That couple looks a little younger than the one I'll tell you about. But Tom and Linda Spalding came from Texas and were just an incredible blessing to all of us. A prayer support, helped us to open the coffee shop, and ministered to people more their own age as they were there in Poland. And, well, they didn't complain about the fact that God called them to go when they were 80 years old. So it's really never too late. There are opportunities to serve in ways that God can continue to work. Another such couple is Dan and Janet Reinhardt. They were a retired couple from Illinois, and they had been able to travel different places around the world and believed that God was directing them to go to Argentina to volunteer 6 months of their life at the regional office. I had the privilege to greet them at the Argentine airport because they arrived to the field just 2 weeks after I did. I had no idea how important this couple would become in my journey there. I truly believe that I would not have made it home without the tangible love and support of Dan and Janet. I've come to realize, and I'm sure I've done this many, many times myself, but it's very easy for us to tell someone that we're praying for them, to tell them that they're not alone, to tell them that they're going to make it and hang in there. But it's a little harder sometimes to be the answer to those prayers, to not make them be alone because you're sitting right there with them in the middle of their pain. So I would just encourage you, if you are praying, then I praise God for that. But if you say you're praying and then you kind of forget about it, ask God to help you remember to actually follow through because those things are really important. Dan and Janet didn't just tell me that I was going to make it and that things were going to be okay. When I was at my weakest and could hardly do anything, they washed my dishes. They prepared packets of food for me so that I could just reach into the fridge or the freezer and eat 6 times a day without having to make any efforts toward that. They encouraged me to rest, sometimes telling me I needed to go home for the day. And sometimes they invited me over for game night just so I could keep my mind off the pain. They drove me to the grocery store when blackouts on the bus would become a dangerous situation, and they took me to countless doctor's appointments. They were the last faces that I saw when I did decide to come home. But you never know when your obedience might help minister to a missionary who's at their lowest point. As you can imagine, in the middle of my difficulties, I was discouraged at times, and I did feel alone. And it's not just for the young at heart, but it is for young people. God can minister through children and teens just as well as adults. And this picture shows a young man, a 15-year-old Hector. He's in the middle, his eyes are closed. That's the nice identifier on this picture. But Hector became a fast friend for me. I tried to sit in with the children during Sunday school, and from day one, he just decided that he was okay listening to my broken Argentine Spanish. And he was okay trying to teach me and to just be present with me. But one of these nights I was feeling incredibly alone in a 3-hour-long service. It's really difficult to stay put when you're in pain. It's really hard and a little embarrassing to have to eat your 6th meal in the middle of service. So when the pastor went to pray, I was trying to be discreet about eating my 6th meal. It was at that time that Hector reached out his arm and put it around me and started praying for me in Spanish. I don't really know what he said. I might have understood if I could have heard him, but it really doesn't matter, because what it said to me is that he was responding to God. He was asking God to help me. He was interceding for me when I didn't even really have the words to voice for myself. And I was really encouraged to find out that just a couple months after I had to leave the field that Hector was baptized. That's why they're wearing these white gowns. This is not their normal attire, I should just clarify. Well, in February, I still did not feel a release from the field. And so I continued to cry out to God for wisdom. It was very difficult to stay, but I knew I wasn't going to stay a second longer than God was wanting me to be there, and I wasn't going to go a second early. Well, as you can imagine, family members, they're especially concerned for your health. I have a family member who is a nurse, and she said, "Thea, what in the world do you need to know to come home? You really just need to come home." And I said, "I know I'm sick. I understand that. But I need God to release me." And part of my struggle, probably, part of the surrender and why God was waiting to release me, is that I had to come to understand that He wasn't going to abandon me if I had to come home early. He could still work through what happened, even though it wasn't what I was expecting to happen. So I had to let go of some things. And sometimes God speaks in mysterious ways. I think perhaps some of you in the adult class might have already heard this story, but it really spoke to me a few weeks back. In one of the ways that God spoke to Corrie ten Boom in the middle of a concentration camp. One day, as Corrie was telling God she was not strong enough to endure any longer, she watched an ant run across the floor of her cell into a small hole in the wall. Then the Lord said to her, "What about that ant?" He went straight to the wall. "Corrie, don't look at your faith. It is weak, like the tiny feet of that ant. Don't dwell on the treatment you might receive from these cruel people. I am your hiding place, and you can come running to me just like that ant disappeared into the hole in the wall." I think too often in my past, I made God my last resort and not my first resort. But He wants to be that first point of contact in the middle of trouble. And yes, even like Corrie ten Boom, God answered my prayers and my family's prayers. He spoke to me through ants. You see, the day that the family members said, "We will be in fervent prayer that God makes it abundantly clear to you that you should come home," the next morning I woke up stumbling into the kitchen really early to get my first of 6 meals. You have to start pretty early. So I'm rubbing my eyes and I thought, what am I seeing? And there were ants all over the walls, all over the ceiling, curtain rods, curtains. They were down on the dining room table. Some of them were dead and a lot of them were still alive. And I thought, I don't even really have the strength to cook for myself right now. I'm not even washing my own dishes. I can't eat with all these critters everywhere, so I had to deal with that first. And in the strangest way, God just gave me this peace and this sense of release that it was okay. It was okay to go home. But I still remember questioning just a little bit, like, is this really just what I want? But before I went to Argentina, the message He gave me to share was about the life of Joseph. Joseph was thrown into a pit. His brothers didn't like him all that much. Then he ended up in Egypt, and he was elevated to leadership. And then out of some confusion, he got thrown in jail. And then he was back in leadership, and God's purposes were accomplished in his life. And so I just was so blessed by the confirmation that God gave me. The very last Sunday I was in Argentina, the pastor spoke about the life of Joseph and how God's purposes don't always make sense to us, but that he really is sovereign, he's in control, and he cares about the details. So I came home. I was appreciating the Sunday school lesson this morning when we talked about Job's friends that came up with all sorts of reasons for why Job was suffering like he was. I had some of those friends in Argentina as well. There were people that speculated on a situation that they didn't really know the full story, and I think all of us have experienced that. But some people said, well, I think you just miss your boyfriend and you're making yourself sick. No. Ryan and I were committed to saying yes to God, and we knew that that year and a half that my yes would take me to Argentina and his yes would keep him in Kansas City to study at the seminary. So we were committed, and that wasn't a problem when we had Skype and letter writing and things like that. They also said, you're probably losing weight because we don't have as much high fructose corn syrup as you do in the United States. But when I had to cut that out of my diet come January and went back, it was very difficult to find anything without high fructose corn syrup. In fact, here, most of our Gatorade is free of it, but there, they have it in there. So that person hadn't read the labels on food for a while to know exactly what they were talking about. But I took refuge in the fact that God, he knows our heart, and he has our back in the middle of confusion. I really wish that I could tell you that as soon as I came back to the United States that things were resolved once I could see my own doctors, but I had 3 horrible weeks with countless doctor visits, more testing than a student in exam week, a trip to the ER on St. Patrick's Day, and very scary reactions to medication that doctors just kind of gave me because they didn't really know what was wrong. So, well, let's try this. And it was in the middle of this lowest point in my journey to date in March that I received a surprise proposal from my boyfriend. I knew that he loved me because at some of the times when I was vomiting, he would hold my hair. And not only that, I mean, that's one thing, but he would tell me that it was his honor to do that. And that's just one small look into the life of my husband, Ryan, because God opened the door for us to be married on June 30th of this year, several months before I should have ever gotten home from the field. And in the middle of all of the craziness, after we were married and came home from the honeymoon, we moved into our very first apartment together and find out that not only did we just choose our roommate for life, but we were blessed with a bunch of other roommates. We have a house that's infested with roaches. I'm allergic to them, so I always have to be like taking an allergy pill just to be in the house. And then we started having gnats that like to fly. They're very aggressive gnats that fly in your face. We've jokingly said that maybe we're going to have to endure the plagues of Egypt. I really hope there are not frogs when I get home. But on top of that, my husband, when he was 17, he had a brain tumor. And they removed it, but it left scar tissue. And he's had epilepsy that has been controlled by medication for several years now. And he'd gone about, 8 years without any seizure activity. But about a month ago, he had a seizure in his sleep for the first time. It just broke through. And so right now, I'm the driver. I was learning stick shift when this happened, but I was failing miserably. So when the neurologist said, sorry, Ryan, you can't drive for 6 months, I think we both panicked a little bit because that was the first day I was on the real roads. I had never shifted to 3rd, 4th, or 5th gear or downshifted. I didn't even know what that was, really. So that has been a situation that has required a lot of patience and grace giving. But we're continuing to go through testing for both of us. The doctors really haven't even figured out the full extent of my problem. I've gotten sick a couple times this past week while traveling, and just am continuing to ask for God's wisdom to the doctors. And yet, we are blessed to be in an apartment complex where we're surrounded by other cultures. I have a neighbor named Betty that called me while I was here in Virginia, and she's from Mexico. She and her husband, they don't have a lot of family in the area, and we're going to play an Argentine game and have empanadas as soon as I get home. So there are opportunities all around us, and God knows best where we need to be at what time. Sometimes he even wants to minister to a doctor or a nurse, and so no matter what your situation, there are chances to share your faith. But the other thing that I am so thankful for is that they made an exception to policy. I shouldn't have been able to maintain my missionary status since I wasn't sure that I was able to get back to the field at this point. But they have allowed for me to continue serving for the South America region. Most of my job is email-based, so I'm writing to people in Spanish and Portuguese every day, and I have video conferences with my colleagues in Argentina. And I'm just waiting for God's leadership and to see if he will open the door here or abroad. But I'm here today not just to tell my story, and of course I'm here to talk about the faithfulness of God, but I also appreciate these times to share so that I can say thank you. I want to thank you for praying for missionaries, those that are here in the States on home assignment or who end up home for other reasons that they can't control, and those who are abroad, because there are times in our ministry, and I know it's the case for people back home too, but times when prayer is the only thing holding you up. It's the sustaining power of the Spirit for the work to continue. I want to thank you for giving, and I want to thank you specifically today for giving through Faith Promise, because it's through Faith Promise and other ways that you give that people like me can say yes to God and be obedient to the calling that he's placed in our hearts. And I want to thank you for going. I think I already heard today that there's someone who's going to be taking a missions trip around Christmas time, whether it's serving through Work and Witness or someone who's maybe willing to go a little bit longer term and serve through Mission Corps for 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. God can teach you a whole lot of things when you're serving. But you also might cross paths with someone who needs to see the love of God expressed in a tangible and active way. I'm going to wrap things up with a song that I think is fitting for the image of being in the cave of Adullam. I think that we serve a God who can turn shepherds into kings when we respond in obedience. David could have short-circuited God's plan and killed Saul, but he waited it out. And this song is actually called Cave of Adullam. So, speak to me in my cave of Adullam. Reach to me, no one cares for my soul. I thought I saw your kingdom, but it's not gonna happen like I thought it would happen. Remind me of the vision you gave me. Remind me what anointing oil is for. I need to know you're near me. I need to know you're holding me just as closely as the day you took my life and gave me a vision. As the day you poured the oil and gave me a dream. I can't believe this is happening. No, I can't believe this is happening. How does a shepherd become a king? Perhaps you find yourself today afraid for your life, hiding out in a cave. Maybe you're not literally afraid, but maybe circumstances have just bombarded you. A bunch of changes have come really, really fast, and you don't feel like you can keep up with what's happening. Maybe God is asking you to let go of something that you just want to hold on to tightly because you don't understand why he would take it away from you. Maybe he's asking you to take on something that you would rather turn your back on. Sometimes it's tempting to throw in the towel and run and hide, but I encourage you, like David, like me, to give up. Don't give up on God. Don't give up on the calling that he's placed on your life. Don't give up on life. But give up on your idea of what he wants to do in and through you. Give up your plans and give up in surrender to the God who created you, who loves you, and wants to be your hiding place.